Tips with Tony. Tips with Tony. All about nutrition from your favorite dietitian. Everything you need to digest in your mind. Tips with Tony. Tips with Tony. Making you healthier one bite at a time. With Tony. Woo.
Hello and welcome to the Tips with Tony podcast. I'm Tony Marinucci, your registered dietitian, helping you get healthy one bite at a time. I am smiling from ear to ear because I'm so excited for this interview right now. I have virtually in front of me Jennifer Wolfe, who I have the pleasure of knowing and meeting in person, and is such a beautiful light in this world, intelligent, smart, just grounded, and just going to share so many knowledge bombs when it comes to relationships, feminine and masculine energy, patterns that we have that we might need to heal, how our relationships can actually help us heal, and all of the things. So I'm so excited to have her. Jennifer, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. And I feel the same way about you. So amazing. And I'm so happy to be here. Thank you.
So happy to have you here. First question, it's a big one. Feel free to go in depth as you'd like. Who are you, what you do, and why do you do what you do?
Yeah, that is a big one. I'm actually relationship expert coach is what I've become. And the journey there is it's unexpected because I didn't know that this is where I'd end up, but it feels like exactly where I'm supposed to be. So I actually always dreamed of being in LA because I thought I wanted to be an actress. And I thought that was like what was in my future. And I followed my dreams there. I went to college at UCLA, but I ended up studying sociology. And that was really the study of people and understanding them. And so I simultaneously started taking acting classes, and I was in these different studies. And I realized that the part of acting that I love is it was not the script. It was not performing. It was understanding the parts of me that I needed to access and the parts of me that were blocked. And for instance, I couldn't cry on cue or these things. And I was like, why can I not access my emotions? And I didn't understand. So I kind of dove more into that side. And that actually led me into graduate school for psychology, counseling psychology, marriage and family therapy. And I was so fascinated with that work and understanding not only myself or how to access my own emotions and how to heal and how to deal with trauma, but how people relate to each other in their relationships, and how I started to see this amazing reality that our relationships are constantly helping us grow. And they do such an amazing, they're such amazing tools to help us do that. So as I was graduating from getting my master's in that, I realized there was a part of me that I've always been drawn to the paved path and feel like, if it's just planned for me, it's more comfortable. But there was a part of me calling out saying, no, you need to actually, go on your own path, carve your own path and do something unique and something different. Because as much as I loved what I was studying, I also saw there were things missing from the actual process of, of healing and dealing with relationships. And some things weren't addressed. So I wanted the freedom to be able to do that. So as soon as I graduated, it was really scary, but I took the leap and I was like, I'm just going to also become an entrepreneur and create my own coaching business. And that's how I ended up here. And it's been about 4 or 5 years now of just, creating that path and loving every second of it. But also, obviously, it's all very challenging. And I've learned and grown and done, all of these things along the way, which it's a very exciting place and also challenging. So that's where I like to be.
Yeah, that's always, I feel like the entrepreneurial spirit is very much like, we love to learn. And like when things get boring, we like to spice it up.
Totally do that. Absolutely. There's the two sides. There's the entrepreneurial side which is its own thing. And then there's the coaching side, which is also its own thing. So combining them has been awesome. Yeah. And not boring.
Amazing. I love that. I love the background that you have. Like you went the traditional route and then decided to do things in a non-traditional way. And I feel like that's super powerful. And I feel like not only, and I know like personally, you've been through things in your relationship that's helped you be a better coach, but then you also have the educational background to support it. And I think the combination of those two things is what makes you such a great coach, right? Like as a registered dietitian, like I've been through the weight loss journey, the body image issues, like the being teased about my weight, like all that. And I also went to school to be a registered dietitian, right? So that combination is very different than someone who hasn't like kind of walked that path or lived that path, or, you know, maybe they walked it and they lived it, but they haven't gone to school for it. There's can be a disconnect, but because you've been through things personally and then you have the education behind you to back it up, it's a really great marriage, ironically.
Yeah.
No pun intended.
No pun intended. Thank you for saying that, because I just realized I gave my educational background. I did not give my personal experience background, but alongside that whole journey, I had gotten married and things drastically, I thought I'd found my, fairy tale. They drastically fell apart, and then we came back together and we had this really, incredibly deep and detailed journey to come out of our own trauma together and to make our relationship work through what people would look at as impossible circumstances. So when I actually lived that, and I actually wanted the freedom to talk about that, because also in traditional therapy and psychology, you're not really supposed to self-disclose. So having the freedom to talk about that story and you know what? Yeah, I've been through these challenges. I've been through so much of what my clients have been through. It's a very important part, obviously, and the most. So,
well, and thank you for sharing that, because that is really a lot of what I want to talk about today, not your personal situation, but like examples of that. So for what I've disclosed to me, like before we've ever recorded, was just kind of through conversation that there was a point, and even just said it now, where you and your husband almost seemed like there was no way that you guys were going to make it, right? That like, I even think like the D word was thrown on the table at some point.
Oh, yeah.
So, and like, even at someone personally, like I'm in a relationship that I'm very loving and committed to, but we've had conversations too, like, what are we doing? Like, is this, is it better if we just go to part ways, right? And like, so I feel like I don't want to say everyone, but I think a majority of people who are in long-term relationships do have those moments of doubt and those moments of, like, is this worth holding on to? And I would really love for you to speak to like that part, like almost like that breaking point. Like are there signs to know that it's worth working on, and versus the signs of like, all right, let's go our separate ways and we might be better departing?
Such a good question. Yeah. So for me, it was it was definitely the D word was thrown out. I work a lot with attachment styles, and the reality of having two different attachment styles, one, my husband being avoidant, me being anxious, this dynamic oftentimes leads to, when there are challenges or when there are moments, because in every relationship, there's going to be challenges and conflicts. That is unavoidable. But the moment that you know that this is not the end, but that this is a conversation, and that this is actually a point to dive in deeper to actually find a path forward, is when all you really need is both people to be willing to do that. It can feel like hopeless. It can feel all the things, but if both people are willing to take responsibility for their part, if they're both willing to be open to growth, and shifting in some way, there is most likely a path, right? Like more often than not, a path forward. When it's one person and the other is not, usually that is, you can fight it and hold on to it for a while, but that is oftentimes the end of the road, because that is what relationships are about. Right. It's, and that's what gives me
two to tango. My mom would say.
and the two to tango thing is the key, because I'm telling you, some really impossible circumstances can be overcome when the two are willing to tango. That is the reality.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I'm so glad you mentioned attachment styles, because I actually hear this get thrown a lot, and I'm not even 100% clear on what they are and what they mean. So what are the different attachment styles?
Okay. So in a nutshell, we form our attachment style really early on when we're very small, and we learn that, and we're constantly absorbing that. Okay, are relationships safe? Are they not safe? What do we, and then our responses to that is how we really form our attachment style. So we do form them when we're little, but then later in life, we also go through traumas that do also they play a part in what attachment style we become. Sometimes you can even shift those later. You absolutely can heal them and become what we call secure. Secure attachment is someone who is very confident and comfortable in relationships. They are okay with expressing their needs. They're great with communication. It's not that they're perfect in relationships, but not a whole lot triggers them or makes them feel like, reactive, or they just feel they're coming from a really secure place. And most likely that's because their caregivers responded to their needs when they were small, that they were shown that relationships are a safe place and that they're actually necessary for us in this life. We need relationships. And so then there's the secure is where we all want to be, right? Anxious is another attachment style. And that forms from someone whose caregivers were sometimes responsive and sometimes not. So they were very inconsistent. Therefore, this anxiety developed in the person whose attachment style was forming, where they're like, oh, is this gonna be there for me or not? Am I going to get my needs met or not? And they would learn to be super hyper vigilant. So people that have anxious attachment are very hyper vigilant. They can tell when something's a little tiny bit off from way before someone who's not anxious can. And then they react accordingly. With a lot of anxiety, they can be really, clingy and just like need a lot from their partner, a lot of reassurance. And it can be really challenging for the person on the other side of that, as well as the anxious attached. Oftentimes those people attract the opposite, which is avoidant attachment.
Smiling because I'm like,
yeah, yes.
I'm not going to say.
More common than you can even imagine. That's why I'm like, you know what? This is how it is a lot of the time. And when people are dealing with avoidance, which can be really difficult because avoidance basically didn't have their needs met in relationship. They had to go it on their own a lot of the time. They learn relationships are not safe. They don't want to be vulnerable. They don't want to need anybody. They've learned to be self-sufficient. And so a relationship can actually be a threat to them. Then you enter in the anxious and you're like, oh, that is a lot for an avoidant. But again, the two go together because of that magnet, they just magnetize each other. And in a way, this can be good because it's such a great opportunity for healing with each other. It's actually a really good dynamic to heal, which was what I found myself in. And we both have moved our way to secure. But that avoidant can be really tough because they can just cut off a relationship just abruptly, and they can disappear for months at a time, and they're really hard to access. And then, of course, the anxious is taking that on as a personal thing, when oftentimes this is just how the attachment style dynamic works. And they're doing what they know to do, which is, oftentimes to run and to just take care of themselves, protect themselves at all costs from what they're seeing as a threat. Mm-hmm. So it's challenging.
And is there anxious avoidant?
Oh, yes, there is.
I wasn't sure because I wasn't sure if it's like a normal, it's like, or it's just like a rare option, like thing.
It is very rare. It's like 3 to 5% of the population, but it's rare because but they benefit. An anxious avoidant can benefit from both sides of the coin, learning about both sides. And oftentimes it can also happen when someone's anxious and then they go through a trauma in their relationship and then they become more avoidant. So there's this kind of like push and pull, right. But they're both, they're both coping and defense mechanisms on kind of opposite ends of the spectrum. So to be honest with you, even though they say that it's rare, I actually don't think it's as rare as we think. I think that it's actually more common. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So now, all right. Thank you for explaining that. It's like I was taught it, but I didn't like know it deeply.
Yes.
I know it more. So, but now I feel like there could be a bazillion steps to healing, but like, where would someone even begin? Okay. Now they have clarity on like, okay, this is my attachment style. So now say, let's use the avoidant and the anxious attachment style in a relationship. Mm-hmm. Like, how does one, like, now we have a fight. This person doesn't want to talk about it. This person's like, let's talk about it. Or like, I need to talk about it, Exactly. What do you do?
Oh, that's such a good question. Cause that is the ultimate question I get asked. Like, what do we do? Cause it's so uncomfortable for both sides. And you do completely different things. So if you're avoidant, then first of all, for both sides, self-awareness. So educate yourself about these attachment styles. It's also really freeing, to be honest, to really understand your own attachment style. There's books like Attached. It's called Attached. There's quizzes online you can take. I'm going to be putting out resources soon about, how to figure out what you are. And so that you know where to start. You most likely have an idea, but once you have that self-awareness, it can help you. So if you're an avoidant, then you would start to understand that this is your thought pattern, that you're thinking that this relationship is a threat is actually keeping you from the intimacy that you're craving, and that you actually need and want this closeness, and that it's actually the thing that you keep trying, even though in your avoidance, you keep trying to, oftentimes an avoidant will start a new relationship very soon because that is not the actual solution. They're looking for intimacy, but they're getting it in the wrong way. So pushing through, staying committed, pushing through, reaching towards your partner instead of running, and starting to identify what are the things that make me go into avoidance? What are my triggers? And stop reacting impulsively to those, but maybe start just giving yourself a little space between your response. Amazing thing about anxious attachment for an avoidant is that those, oftentimes these people are so loving and caring and like they just want to be there for you. And, and they're an amazing place for an avoidant to heal and learn that relationships are so safe and they're a beautiful place, that we all need. We need this intimacy so much. And when we have that beautiful relationship, so many other things in our life can thrive too. So if on the opposite side, if you're anxious, that desire to just chase and, and grab on and like pull them back in actually makes it way worse for the avoidant. So holding on to that desire, that need, that urge to chase or holding back on it, and understanding that what you're looking for in the avoidant, you can get from yourself and you can get from other people in your life, which oftentimes is reassurance, validation, love, self-care. There's so many other coping mechanisms that at least can help you through the time when they're in avoidance, because then it actually helps the avoidant come back sooner when you're not chasing them, because they're actually having to live in their avoidance as opposed to living in the running. Does that make sense? Like they're sitting in this this loneliness, and you're allowing that to happen so that they can understand quicker that this is not what they want. Right. And also as an anxious, it's not what you want to be chasing someone down. You actually want to be chosen for who you are. And that will help ease your anxiety and help, for you as an anxious to heal in a much stronger way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow. Really, really powerful. So as you're talking, I'm like thinking about because I know one of the other things you talk about are like the masculine and feminine energy. Like, do attachment styles, are they often like associated with one energy over the other, or does that like make things extra complicated? Like,
I love that. No, I love that. Absolutely. The whole thing is, these are just concepts to help us understand ourselves. So when we kind of use as many as we can, it's just even more helpful. So I would say, yes, I would say an avoidant would be a more wounded masculine energy. And because there's feminine and masculine energy, then there's wounded masculine and wounded feminine, right?
Let's talk about it.
Okay. So
define those first.
Okay. So feminine, healthy, just feminine energy, thriving feminine energy is for someone everyone has their own core, right, of the energy that they hold the majority of. This is not about gender. This can be literally any gender. So there's feminine men, there's, core feminine men, there's core feminine women, core, all the things. So feminine is really that energy is about, sometimes I refer to it like being in the womb, like you're just kind of marinating in self-care and love and connection to your higher power. It's where inspiration is. It's this beautiful, soft, flowy energy that if you have a core feminine energy, when you really allow yourself to go there, oftentimes people with anxious attachment are in their wounded feminine. So when they come into that really grounded feminine energy, their anxiety kind of dissolves because it's this beautiful, it's just a beautiful energy. In order for that also to happen, a lot of times there needs to be a safe masculine energy holding that, because the masculine energy is more about structure. The masculine energy is goal oriented. It's clear, it has direction. Oftentimes, if you have a core feminine energy, you're looking for that masculine energy to take the lead in some ways and be like, let's talk about it in dating. If you're looking for a masculine man, and you're a core feminine woman, then you would want that man to come in and be like, he knows what he wants. He's clear. He comes after you. He commits. And it's this beautiful dynamic that someone with a core feminine energy really craves that. So when the two are healthy and they're thriving and they're working together, it's a beautiful marriage, no pun intended, but it's a beautiful combination and it's very healthy. So
hello, I'm interrupting this episode to tell you about Surely. Surely is a non-alcoholic wine that tastes like wine, is as delicious as wine, and is as refreshing as wine, but you just don't have the hangover the next day or the alcohol. Sometimes after a long day, we want to put our feet up and sip on a nice glass of wine just because of the act of doing so. For some of us, it becomes very habitual. And we don't always necessarily want the alcohol, but we do kind of want just something to kind of look forward to. So Surely is a sure way for you to do that. They have sparkling rosé, Sauvignon Blanc. They have sparkling, like a Cabernet, and they are all extremely delicious and they actually taste like wine. So make sure you go to the link in my show notes to save 15% off. As the weather's getting nicer, it is really just a great thing to kind of have where maybe you just are cutting back or you just don't drink in general and you kind of want to be part of the party and part of the fun without actively consuming all of the wine that maybe you're used to out of habit. It's really, really refreshing. So go to the link in my show notes to save 15% off with discount code Tips with Tony and enjoy.
Wounded masculine, when, there's multiple things that can cause this to happen. Often, it's trauma of some kind where the wounded masculine becomes super aggressive and a lot of trauma, a lot of defenses, a lot of armor on that, and can make it really unsafe feeling for someone that's feminine to come into that. Oftentimes this can become abusive. It can become controlling. It's just this really strong, uncomfortable kind of energy that can do a lot of damage. And even to themselves, right? Because it's also turns on themselves. And then the wounded feminine is more known to just be very ungrounded, very flighty, and like not have, just a lot like that anxious energy. So if we're comparing the two, then it would be, there's a lot of insecurity, a lot of no clarity, right? Like nothing to grab onto, just kind of floating through and really uncomfortable with that. So not really connected to anything, greater than themselves or grounded in any way. Hopefully that comes across clear.
Yeah, no, thank you for explaining that. Like, so
it can be, it's a very, it's a very fluid topic. So, if there's
I feel like it would be really cool if we had like a client example. Can you maybe use one of your current, like maybe a client that came to you, keep people like obviously anonymous, but like a couple, because I know you work with couples, like a couple that came to you, kind of like the dynamic between the attachment styles, between the masculine and feminine energy, and kind of like the work that you guys did together, or maybe the assignments you gave them or the things they had to do to build and repair. I feel like an example, because like as you're speaking to me, I'm like thinking, am I wounded or am I anxious? Like, am I wounded masculine or anxious?
You're not alone. This happens.
Like I'm trying. Like, okay, so I'm actually not sure now. It's like the whole time I thought I was avoidant, but like maybe I'm anxious, or maybe I'm just have wounded feminine energy. Like I'm like, what's happening?
Listen, you're not alone. And this is the same thing that happens when you're studying psychology. You're like, do I have this? Do I have that? Am I that? We all have everything. Like we are all we have dynamics in all ways, right? So again, understanding what they are and when you're in those, it's not,
I think that's you mentioned before, and I just want to make it clear for the listeners, because if I'm feeling like a little bit scattered right now, I think that people probably are. It's like, it's fluid. Like you could sometimes be in here and then sometimes be here. You're not defined like this. We're not trying to define you as like, you are a wounded feminine person, or like you're, I like that it's just more of like, okay, when you're feeling something, pay attention and try to get clear on where is this coming from.
And that's exactly it. If you know what it is, if you can name it and identify it, then you know how to move out of it and how to shift it. So a good example, oftentimes the core healthy feminine, their defense is going to be wounded masculine. So it's not like if you're a feminine, you're going to then be wounded feminine. Oftentimes, a lot of
that makes so much more sense.
Yeah. Thank you. The feminine energy is going to go into wounded masculine because they had to protect themselves, right? They had to learn how to forge their own way. And if they were in trauma of some kind, if they were hurt or if they, felt threatened, they're going to take on their own masculine and they're going to, make that happen. That can be oftentimes when a client will find me is, I don't know how to find my person. I'm looking for this, really strong masculine, let's say man, and I can't seem to make it work with them or attract them into my life. Oftentimes this is because of the wounded masculine shield that they're carrying. And so a masculine energy will try to come into that. And there will be this like very intense interaction. Definitely no polarity. Polarity is when, one is attracted to the other, like magnets. The feminine and the masculine energies are they polarize each other. So even in a relationship that's been happening for a long time, you can have this amazing polarity in the beginning, but then things can happen that push the feminine into the wounded masculine and the masculine into the wounded feminine. And then there's this loss of polarity, right? And there's like a loss of attraction. There's a loss of passion. There's a loss of intimacy. And so that's the same dynamic where it's pointing out that there are issues and there are things that need to be worked through that will then allow you to go back into your natural core energy as you will do when you become healthier and you are able to lower those shields down, and come closer to each other. Super similar to attachment styles.
Yeah, so I love that. Okay. So what would the steps be? Say you're core, you're feminine at the core, but you've noticed that you're operating in your wounded masculine. What are some steps that someone can take to get back to their feminine core?
Yeah. I love that example because that's my favorite. So my favorite steps are when you have a core feminine and you're in the wounded masculine, the best thing to do is only what feels amazing to you. So this can be, it's super unique to everybody. For me, it's as simple as spending time in nature. As you know, I'm planning an Africa retreat. This is like the ultimate place.
I saw that. Oh my God, you have to talk about it.
Yes. Well, that is where it was born listen, life requires a lot of masculine energy, right? When we're running a business and doing all these things.
Right. And you have to use it. You can't avoid. You have to both have their point and purpose.
Have to. Yeah. And if you're you can be in your core feminine in your relationship, but then your business might require your masculine. So there's all these different dynamics. Africa is just the epitome of what helps me to be in my feminine energy and just relax into it. The amount of inspiration that I get, the amount of connection that I feel with the land, with God, with the animals, with how things are, that's so feminine. That's everything is as it needs to be, right? And you just kind of relax into the present moment. So anything that takes you into the present moment, if you don't know what that is, it's okay, because it's easy to get away from that and disconnected from that. Just start doing little things and also think back to when you were a child. What did you love to do? What did you do just to play? Because children they're just there to play. They're not trying to produce something. They're just want to enjoy their life. So think about that. And for me, it was like, I used to love piano. So I literally bought a piano and I just started to surround myself, and I put, all nature. Beauty is also something that inspires me and takes me into my feminine energy. So making my space beautiful. These are all examples of steps you can take to just really come back to your feminine energy and let yourself marinate in that. If you can do that here first, you're going to be able to bring that into your relationship a lot easier. You need to embrace it within yourself first and shift back into it. It also will help your partner do the same with the masculine energy, because once one person kind of goes into their core energy, it really helps the other person find their way as well to theirs. So it's really helpful.
Really? Yeah. That's so great. That's so great. What are some roadblocks or like emotional things that tend to come up? Like, cause like, as you're sharing that and explaining that, I'm already thinking, but like, it feels almost like, I feel like someone who's really in their masculine, it's like everything needs to have a point, everything needs to have a purpose.
100%.
And it's like, that almost feels like, I don't have time for that. Like,
Yeah.
like it's like, like it sounds beautiful and it sounds amazing, but like, I gotta, get to work. I gotta get stuff done. Like, what advice or tips or thoughts do you have on that?
I love that because that's exactly what I hear every time. It's the typical conditioning and mindset of our culture, first of all, but also just of survival. That's what you're verbalizing is a lot out of a survival place, right? And oftentimes this is what will uproot someone who's naturally a core feminine into their wounded masculine, is that something along their life made them feel like they have to go into survival mode. And then you get stuck in that survival mode and you're not even aware that you're in survival mode because it's just normal, right? But you're literally in that mode.
I think honestly, the pandemic really did this for so many people,
100%.
Because it's like, here we are in 2023 and it's like, we're still getting used to the fact that like we can travel whenever we want, and we can go wherever we, like we're still getting used to the fact of like going out again, where we were so used to like being home all the time. Like, I know for me, especially now that like coming out of like winter and like it being like nice outside, I'm in New York. And so, the weather's finally beautiful again. And it's like, I love the sun. I love being outside. And it's just like, I like reflect. It's like, I feel like I haven't been outside in 3 years, which is silly because I do, and I go out, but it's like, it almost seems like we're starting over again.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, such an important point. There was like a mass trauma happening and a mass survival instinct. I mean, yes, we were all put in absolute crisis and survival mode. And at the same time, the pandemic was a really huge opportunity to tap into feminine because there's nothing to do. Right. So I saw it that way as well, where I'm like, yes, this is a crisis and this is going to put a lot of, survival mode out there. And it's also an opportunity to do things you would never do without the pandemic, which a lot of times is just sit there, right? Like meditate, to do, because you can't produce, if you're not able to leave your house, there's a lot of things that were stopped. Little things like a deer walking out in the street, or, like some little, these things that would happen. It took you out in the moment and you were just like, oh, wow, that's actually miraculous that this is happening. Right. So there were little moments, little glimpses of that actually could be opportunities. But in order for you to take those opportunities, there also has to be like a understanding that you are going to be okay. Like you're going to survive. And if you're not truly helping yourself regulate your nervous system, getting your amygdala, your little part of your survival brain to stop firing so that you can move into, there's some real scientific things to this and some parts, right? So that awareness of the mindset that you said, which is, I don't have time for that. And starting to poke holes in that, and starting to understand that like, well, maybe I could have 5 minutes, maybe I could 10 minutes, and why, to understand that producing something is not always the most effective thing to be doing. In fact, most of the clients that come to me are completely burned out. And they are not even able to produce something at that point because they're so empty. Because let's be honest, the feminine energy, whether you're core masculine or not, you have to spend time in the feminine energy to refill yourself, to literally fill yourself to the brim so that you have something to pour out. Mm-hmm. And yes, it can feel very challenging to shift into that energy when you feel like there's so much more to be done. So just inching your way in is really helpful.
Yeah.
But I promise you, if you do it, you're going to be so much more productive too.
So I was going to say, and then like you mentioned before, like really the core of being in your feminine, in a healthy feminine, it's like, you're going to be inspired, you're going to feel creative, you're going to feel connected, you're going to, you're going to do, the way to get there is to do things that make you feel good. And I always tell people, when you feel good, you do things that usually are productive, ironically. And you just like, it's such a beautiful cycle. So
you have one without the other. So understand that the masculine is about producing. It's about achieving goals. It's about getting stuff done. And, and you won't be able to maintain that without your feminine. So putting an importance and a reason to do it for those wounded masculines is really helpful, because you're like, oh, now I need this to be more productive and successful. Okay.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Yeah. The word that just came to me is like, just letting go. Like, it's sometimes like, just like letting go and letting in is just going to be such a powerful shift that I think so many people can probably take.
Yeah, letting go, surrendering, and trust.
I will say, sorry, Jen, not to cut you off, but just speaking back to like, the majority of the people that listen to this really struggle with their relationship with food. And I think they fear the flexibility when it comes to nutrition and how it can be fluid and it doesn't have to be super rigid, and like their workouts don't have to be perfect. And I feel like when they're operating from that place, it's probably more in like a masculine energy, and the fear of tapping into their feminine is what's preventing them from actually being able to find the balance. Because I just gave the example actually on one of our group calls last night with our clients about the pendulum, right? Like if you hold and you pull and you try to control and you try to control and you try to restrict and you try to like do the best you can, and eventually you're not going to be able to sustain that. You're going to burn out and you're going to let go. And that's when you go the complete other way, where you like throw it at the towel, you give up completely. And so I think people associate this idea of tapping into their feminine as that of like letting go completely and like, not having any sense of, groundedness. And it's like, no, actually, if you stop holding on so hard and you stop working in that, trying to operate from here, eventually the pendulum kind of, it's instead of it swinging back and forth, you guys can't see me right now, most of you, but it'll, come to center. So
that's literally the metaphor that I use, is the pendulum. So it's the perfect one.
I didn't create that. That is definitely a psychology metaphor.
But it's the perfect visual, because the reality is feminine energy is actually the grounded middle. So let's like kill that idea that the wounded feminine, yes, that would be the other side, right? But feminine, healthy feminine energy grounds you. It is what grounds you. It is not the masculine. Yes, masculine holds space for that, but you are grounded by actually coming in. Like imagine your body fully relaxing, letting go of all cortisol, which actually holds on to weight. Emotionally, you are actually putting your body in such a healthier place for it to actually just come back to center. It's going to be what it wants to be naturally, right? And it's not going to hold on, like you were saying over here. It also like holds on all that stress, all that thing. It holds on to so many of the things that we don't want, even though we think we're in this. I know that I've done that where I'm like, let's perfect schedule of working out and eating. And, you think you are controlling it, but in reality, it's backfiring, right? So yeah. So that feminine is boom, right in that grounded middle. And it is a beautiful thing how your life, including your body and your relationships and all the things, reflect back to you. When you're in that state first, it kind of, everything can come into alignment, and it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I'm glad that was like full circle moment. I like to bring it back to that. That was really, really great. Anything else you want to share or kind of like leave our listeners with before we wrap up today?
I think this was a really important conversation. I think the awareness, starting to just understand yourself better and understand your partner. If I could just communicate that there is a why behind our actions. There is a why. And that why is so important to help you find a path forward together. And it is possible. So if I could just give that hope really of just, even if you feel like it's impossible, or you feel like you're hopeless, that there's a way forward. And sometimes it's through just understanding things in a different way and seeing things in a different light. And then equipping yourself with that knowledge. And all these tools we talked about really are just ways to apply and understand, okay, feminine, masculine, avoidant, anxious, all these things, right? And there's so many more out there. So continuing your journey is in that way is so powerful.
Yeah, this is so great. Where can people find you connect with you. When's your retreat in Africa? This is so cool. You got to let me know.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm on Instagram at Coach Jen Wolfe, TikTok at Coach Jen Wolfe. And my website is on there as well, jenniferwolfeinc.com. There's information about my retreat on my website, and the Africa retreat. It's going to be in June, and it is an 8-day, incredibly just amazing experience that I have done multiple times myself. And now my sister and I are leading it together with one of the best guides of all time in Africa.
I just got goosebumps. I didn't know Tara, that makes sense. Like, so Tara, oh no, she was just in Australia. She wasn't in. Yeah. She
has really, really powerful modalities herself to help people kind of move into their aligned self, and it's about remembering who you are, removing all this stuff that we're not, and then being able to step into your life in the way and actually get the things you want. It's really starts with that really powerful, just like a really powerful jumpstart in Africa. But if you don't go to Africa, it goes in line with what we talked about. Start to really love yourself and be present in your environment and take care of yourself in that way. And then things can move forward. So that's where you can find me. And that's the retreat. We'll actually keep posting about that and many more exciting things to come.
Yeah. It's like, and because you do coaching with couples. You do one-on-one coaching if someone's single, correct?
I
also,
do.
if they are looking for dating or loving themselves, even stuff like that.
Absolutely.
And then do you do group coaching as well, or do you just stop that?
Yeah, that is, I'm building that right now. But right now I'm doing, the one-on-one is, and the couples and group is coming. And even if you are in a relationship, but you want coaching just that's also really helpful, because when one person starts doing the work and one person starts really digging in, that can be really inspirational to your partner as well.
Yeah, for sure.
So there's all those options. They're all listed on my website. And
guys, I really, really, really believe in Jen and her work. Like she, I know there's so many coaches out there, and sometimes it's hard to know who you can trust, but I'm telling you guys, Jen's the real deal. And if you are struggling with your relationship with yourself, and you just want to learn more about how to be connected to yourself and connected to your partner, Jen's definitely a person to do it. So make sure you follow her on Instagram or TikTok. I will put that in the show notes. And I'm going to find out more about Africa, because is June what? My birthday is June 9th. That might be like a really...
We would love to have you. Are you kidding?
I've always wanted to go. My best friend actually did her honeymoon there, which I thought was so cool.
I have
the pictures and the videos and all the things that so cool. So
and there's stuff on my pages too about there's pictures and videos from when I've been there. It truly is, a beautiful, such a different experience. There's nothing like it. So please come.
That'd be amazing. I definitely want the details. Okay. Awesome. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for listening. As always, this is Toni Marinucci, your registered dietitian, helping you get healthy one bite at a time.